Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Breakthrough Contract Bottlenecks with AI and Without Added Risk. Here's how. My name is Giles Bruce, Assistant Editor for Becker's Healthcare. On behalf of all of us, thanks for joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to walk us through a few quick housekeeping instructions. We'll begin today's webinar with a discussion, and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You could submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen. Today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. You can use the same link you used to log into today's webinar to access that recording. And if at any time you don't see your slides moving or have trouble with the audio, please try refreshing your browser. You can also submit any technical questions into the Q&A box. We are here to help. We want to thank Ntracts for sponsoring today's webinar. Ntracts is the leading contract lifecycle management solution built specifically for healthcare organizations. With 85+ years of industry expertise, Ntracts streamlines the healthcare contracting process, reduces compliance and financial risk, and supports organizations' strategic goals through built-in best practices, automated workflows, and user-friendly reporting tools. Ntracts is committed to serving our customers' compliance needs by continually incorporating built-in best practices that stay ahead of the ever-changing regulatory and technological landscape. In March 2025, Ntracts expanded its suite of solutions with the acquisition of Compliatrix, a platform for healthcare organizations to manage their regulatory, accreditation, and administrative compliance needs. Together, these solutions help healthcare organizations operate more efficiently while staying ahead of evolving regulatory demands. Learn more at ntracts.com. Also, DocJuris is a leading contract negotiation platform that powers contracting for rapidly growing startups and large enterprises. With its headquarters in Houston, Texas, DocJuris operates globally and across every major B2B vertical. With that, I'm pleased to introduce today's moderator, Stephanie Haywood, Senior Vice President of Sales and Client Engagement at Ntracts. Stephanie, thanks for being here today. I'll now turn the floor over to you to get us started.
Great, thank you so much, and welcome everyone this afternoon. We're so thrilled that you've all joined us today. I'm so excited to be sitting here with my friend, Henal Patel, CEO of DocJuris, and Lily Ha, VP of Product at Ntracts. I'd like to take a couple of minutes to introduce each of them today. Lily is a Vice President of Product at Ntracts. Lily brings extensive experience in product leadership, where she's led the development of several and various fintech products, including launching embedded software solutions, incrementally improving a mature product, and conceptualizing and finding product market fit for brand new products that target new end users. She's also built out operational processes and internal and external customer education, resources to ensure products scale to meet ongoing demand. At Ntracts, Lily focuses on solving urgent market needs by building technologies that empower healthcare organizations to manage contracts more efficiently, so they can stay focused on delivering high-quality patient care. She holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and is passionate about building inclusive, high-performing teams that create impactful tools and strengthen legal and compliance operations in healthcare. Henal is the founder and CEO of DocJuris. As mentioned, an enterprise AI company based in Houston, Texas, that's really redefining contract negotiation for mid to large organizations. And since launching DocJuris in 2018, he's grown his team into the leading provider of AI-powered redlining and review workflows that accelerate deal cycles while controlling and mitigating risk. Before founding DocJuris, Henal spent nearly a decade as an in-house counsel for healthcare and energy companies in Texas, where he led transactional practices and pioneered early AI applications in legal operations. Henal, Lily, thank you so much both for joining us. I'm really excited about this conversation. Before we get started, I'd love to just spend a couple of minutes polling the audience to really understand a bit more about who's participating today, so that we can really work to tailor the conversation a bit. So just to start, if you could share what your role is within your organization, and we'll let this sit for just a couple of seconds while we understand the audience. Lots of health systems, if you're in IT or tech, if you're outside of healthcare as well, please be sure to share that as well. Okay, well, let's just take another look. Looks like we have a lot of in-house counsel today, several compliance officers, pretty evenly split, and consultants. So looking forward to this discussion. I think it'll be incredibly impactful as we talk about how AI is being integrated and included in your legal and compliance processes. Our second question, we'd love to know what you're most interested to learn about. So how to speed up contract review and negotiations with AI, which are conversations that we have frequently. If you want to learn to reduce risk and improve compliance using automation, which of course we're going to touch on today, how to balance those AI tools with human legal expertise, which I think is going to be a key topic, and really excited to have Henal and Lily dig into that a bit. How other healthcare organizations are successfully using AI in contracting, or really how to get started in implementing AI into your contract lifecycle processes. So we'll give everyone just another minute to respond, and we'll take a look at those responses. Great. So looks like the majority of our individuals and participants want to learn how to speed up contract review and negotiation with AI, followed by how other healthcare organizations are successfully using AI in contracting, and then how to get started implementing it into your CLM process. So we'll definitely be touching on all of the topics today, including those three. And finally, and I think a discussion that we have all the time, what is your level of comfort with using AI in a professional setting? Are you very comfortable? Are you using it every day? Somewhat comfortable, but really don't know the organization's guidelines. And of course, we're hearing that throughout the industry, as AI committees are being formed. Are you somewhat comfortable? Do you occasionally use it, or are you not comfortable at all? And so we'll give everyone just another second to respond to those. Okay, looks like people are somewhat comfortable and occasionally use it, and others, about 21%, very comfortable and using it every day. And so excited to have this discussion, share how it can be incorporated into your day-to-day practices. Thank you all for your response to the poll questions, and let's jump into our discussion. Henal, Lily, the contracting process in healthcare is notoriously complex. Can we just start by having each of you share maybe a couple-minute overview of some of the biggest pain points that you're currently seeing in the industry when it comes to contract bottlenecks and compliance challenges? And Lily, we'll start with you if you don't mind.
Sure. I think as we're talking to the market and our Ntracts customers, we keep hearing that people are being asked to do more with less. Right, you're reviewing 30% more contracts, but your team is not growing by 30%. I think that's really struck me as where the complexity and the amount of work and the volume are both increasing. The second area that I think separates the healthcare industry from any other industry is how much M&A activity there is. So aside from everything just being complex on its own, you're also trying to combine compliance and legal efforts between two different organizations. And those are really unique challenges to the healthcare space.
Thank you, Lily. Henal?
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. And Lily, I think you hit on something critical here around scale. I mean, I'd add that in healthcare, we're seeing not just more regulations, but a real explosion in sort of volume and stakeholder involvement. I mean, so for example, you have privacy and data use rules layered on top of anti-kickback, state-level patient access mandates. all of which means legal teams are often swamped with interpreting requirements, let alone embedding them into contracts, right? So, you know, and unfortunately, though, I think you'll be surprised at the amount of low-value work that's happening around this complexity. So, for example, on average, a contracts professional spends about 2 hours a day copying and pasting and finding Word. And whenever I tell our clients about the statistic, I always get nodding heads, like, yeah, I do that every day. And, you know, at the same time, to Lily's point, timelines keep shrinking. Folks expect turnaround in days, if not hours. And as we saw in the poll, over 54% are interested in learning how AI can speed up the review process. But the challenge, though, is that playbooks and frameworks to guide those reviews haven't kept pace. And so there's this real mismatch that creates a perfect storm. Contracts bounce between clinical, finance, IT security, Q&A, back to legal, often via email chains, clunky Word documents. And by the time you surface a key obligation, let's say a new breach notification clause, you already lost weeks and accrued risk. So, you know, I think in a nutshell, the big bottlenecks we're seeing are regulatory complexity without corresponding process maturity. And then from our perspective, you pair that with over-reliance on manual redlining tools, sort of like this perfect storm for inefficiency.
Yeah, well said, Henal and Lily. So, you know, we're continuing to hear in the market and from clients that because of the challenges and some of the statistics that you've talked about, that they're really looking to implement AI solutions that can help healthcare organizations do more with less, help mitigate risk, make sure that we're not getting on down the contracting process when we're at that point we've identified that, you know, we've got an issue that we probably should have recognized previously. And we really also want to enable our teams to help mitigate risk of noncompliance. As healthcare organizations and legal professionals, compliance officers look to move to AI, what are the things that they should be incorporating or thinking about when they're evaluating AI features, specifically when it comes to contract lifecycle management and not just the technology, but those processes overall? Lily, perhaps we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think you really want to think about what your goal is. Are you trying to raise efficiency? Are you trying to mitigate risk? Are you trying to do all those things at once? And really guide your how you're evaluating solutions based on those goals, right? Your goal isn't just to get AI into your organization. Your goal is to actually drive towards an outcome. And so you want to really partner with people who have a strong perspective on how they might be incorporating that AI to get you to that user outcome you're looking for. And I think Ntracts feels strongly about how we develop AI features, and DocJuris too, and that's why we've been such good partners. But I think, you know, one, you really want AI to show its work. Like, think back to grade school when you would get to a math problem and you get to an answer and your teacher is like, show me your work, because then you can sort of follow any of the logic leaps. And as a critical thinker, you can say, oh, I don't know if I believe AI in this particular situation. So one is show your work. Two is, I think you really want to make sure that the AI suggestions, the AI itself, is really integrated with the rest of the product. That makes it more user-friendly. That makes it easier to incorporate and not something that you have to think about doing on the side. And then third, I think, is really you want to focus, like, we're all healthcare professionals here. Well, some of us are actually in, you know, operating healthcare organizations, but we're always trying to think about the healthcare context, because you want to really apply these, if your goal is to mitigate risk, you want to apply these tools to the risky areas of your organizations, right? You want somebody who understands that in the software, you need to treat a vendor that has access to PHI a little differently than a vendor that doesn't, right? That they have different risk profiles.
Absolutely, Lily. And I think you hit some, you touched on a point, which is really, you know, not only do you need to make sure that you're taking these considerations into account, but also you talked about how we chose to partner with DocJuris because they have a lot of the same thoughts and approach. And so, Henal, I'm hopeful that you could talk to us a little bit about, you know, DocJuris and how you and your approach and your technology differs from other organizations that they may encounter.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm probably going to end up saying it back a lot of the things that Lily said. I mean, I couldn't agree more. So I may sound repetitive here. We really lean into specialization rather than broad conversational AI. So if we get a little bit more specific into transparency, domain expertise, and composability, which are, I think, the main themes of what Lily just said, we built our platform around the review process, the contract review process, which means we're laser focused on that. So if we double click on, for example, transparency, every suggestion that DocJuris makes comes with a clear why in sort of like this feature-rich editing experience. So you can click into the source clauses from your playbook, review commentary, see which precedent language was used and why, and trace back the logic. I think conversely, if you look at chatbots like Copilot, ChatGPT, Anthropic, I know there's some folks that are very familiar with AI. Although those tools are very exciting and interesting, they can create more risk because it's truly garbage in, garbage out. I mean, you're at the whim of how that particular model was trained, which version of the model, and quite frankly, the prompt that sits on top of the model in terms of what you want it to do. And so that kind of leads into domain expertise, which for us, our models aren't just generic NLP tools. They're really developed with guardrails specific to a customer's risk framework. And I think you're going to hear a lot about that for the rest of the webinar. I mean, it's a specialized focus that flags the right obligations, not 50 generic risks. And I think to touch again on what Lily said, composability. So we know that legal teams often bake DocJuris into larger CLM products like Ntracts, which is why we work really well together. So we expose our AI outputs via APIs, widgets, checklists that slot right into your existing workflow. So there's no switching context. And a lot of that's going to change here in the future too. But the end point here is that you get a guided step-by-step review process with built-in guardrails for risk. And setting aside DocJuris, I mean, if that's one thing you take away today, step-by-step review, guardrails built in for risk management, and this hands-on checklist to validate every change before it goes final, I think that's key. And when you put it all together, and this applies to any sort of application of AI in our view, speed and velocity are different. I think the one thing people say about AI is, oh, it's making me faster. I don't have to think as much. Well, the fastest way to get a contract done is just to sign it, right? But I think 33% of the people on this call that are the lawyers would not agree to that. So, but in that same vein, you also wouldn't run an AI red line and just send it out without looking at it. So that's how not how our product designed. So it's all about contracting without compromise. So leveraging these tools, leveraging the technology, but doing it well. I think that's the big important theme here for today.
Yeah, you both touched on several key points there, and one of them really kind of validating the AI outputs. And I think it goes back to what Lily made a comment about showing your work, and Henal, I know you all take that same approach when you think about how you allow your interaction with the solution and ultimately the incorporation between the workflows. Would love to talk a little bit about some of the most common misconceptions around using AI, specifically for contracting in highly regulated industries like healthcare. We've also got several compliance officers on the call as well. So in addition to the lawyers and the compliance officers, probably want to hear about how we can make sure that we are addressing those misconceptions and continuing to mitigate risk. Henal, I'll start with you.
Yeah, there's so much I can say here. There's been a spectrum, right? At the early, and we've been doing this for about 7 years. So early on, the misconception was I didn't know AI could predict the next word, right? It was there was a misconception around how that works, and now it's sort of swinging back the other way, where I think people treat AI in some cases like a legal oracle. Like, hey, if you feed it a contract, it'll spit back the perfect clause, or it'll just know it if I give it some information. But LLMs are just pattern predictors. Before it was sort of classic tagging of data to create these prediction models based on information that's tagged. So in a nutshell, these AI models, they don't know the law. You really have to treat every suggestion as a first draft. So built-in audit trails, human review steps, clear checklists, so you can validate and override those things that look off given the overall context of a deal is a big misconception. I think second, there's this idea that accuracy is all about model size or endless fine tuning. Well, I can just fine tune the model and it'll be fine. But you can train on every healthcare policy under the sun, but the return quickly plateaus. In practice, you get way more mileage from just more thoughtful prompt engineering, retrieval, augmented generation against your own clause library, and I think a guided UI that steers through these risk hotspots. And again, garbage in, garbage out. Software at the end of the day will be the biggest lift. I think third, there are some legal tech companies that claim that they have their own model, right? And I think the reality is that most organizations stand down foundational models like GPT, Gemini, Anthropic, and there's a bit of a race to the bottom happening right now. And the competitive edge really lives in the software and the governance that you layer on top, not in forging a new base model. I think that's a big misconception here as well. So bottom line, AI in healthcare contracting is a powerful co-pilot, but not a solo pilot. You need the right processes, transparency, domain expertise to make it deliver on the promise that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think. Oh yeah, I can jump in there a little bit too. I mean, Henal made some really great points. I think that this is where we see specificity can get higher precision, leads to higher precision, and that's why we think healthcare context and all that stuff really can lead to a better user outcome. I actually have a funny story about this whole garbage in, garbage out, and why you need a human to really double check people's work. So I was helping a friend try and calculate the interest payments on this loan. It was part of a contractual document, and ChatGPT said, you're going to be paying this amount in interest. Well, how did you get that? Well, given April has 31 days, your interest payment will be this. And well, April obviously does not have 31 days. It is very well documented that April has 30 days, but because of LLM is really just predicting the next word, it might have thought April was a month, and some months have 31 days. And that's why I brought in sort of that wrong number. And so things as concrete as how many days are in April can be misinterpreted by AI. And so you really want to think about that kind of application for a clause, right? And that's where I think DocJuris has done really well, is making sure that you have those playbooks and those things to sort of train that model. It doesn't have to be a lot. It can be small amounts of data, but it's very tailored to your situation and really puts those guardrails on that model.
Thank you, Lily. And helping ensure that, something that we're always wanting to make, to ensure is mitigating that compliance risk in real time. So we know that healthcare organizations are actively working to stay ahead of evolving compliance regulations. And they're also looking for ways to streamline their processes and incorporate AI and incorporate contract lifecycle management solutions, et cetera. So how can AI support this effort and mitigate that risk really in real time?
Yeah, I think a lot of times people will talk to me about how can AI help me? And I think that's kind of the wrong question. It's a solution in search of a problem almost. I think really the question you're asking is, what can I help standardize and automate so that I can reduce my risk and make my organization more efficient? And I think big picture, really, compliance comes down to culture, right? What are all those business stakeholders in your organization doing when you're not breathing down their necks about policies and procedures and your processes, right? What are those choices that they're making? And I think it's especially hard for the healthcare industry right now because M&A is driving so much of that organizational change. You're trying to bring in multiple groups of people who may have operated differently together. And so really you're looking for tools that can support people and make sure that everyone is sort of operating. They might not know what the next right step is, and they're just guessing. Well, if you bring in tools that have that standardization in it, it can include AI or it might not. But that's really where you're going to get the bang for your buck on compliance and risk. And so I like to think about sort of leading indicators of compliance and lagging indicators. So a lagging indicator might be you're trying to get everything ready for an audit. Well, if you bring AI into that, maybe it can speed up your audit process and gathering all that information. But at the end of the day, is it really making your organization less risky? Because all that stuff has already happened, right? You're just reporting on it. That's a lagging indicator. Where maybe you really want to focus your efforts are on those leading indicators. Things like, how many compliance processes do you have? How are they best in class type of processes? Are they modeled off of best practices? Can someone who is like new to the organization accidentally skip a step? What percent of your contracts are going through those processes? How can you look at statistics? Like, this is more real time, but like, how can you see that, oh, in April, we actually ended up not being able to do as many contracts this month than we did in March, and why, and like be able to dig down deeper, right? So if you have AI to help in those types of indicators, I think that's going to lead to a much more successful compliance program.
Thank you, Lily. So, obviously compliance can be achieved through software and solutions, not necessarily requiring AI. In other instances, we've seen where AI is incorporated into those both regulatory compliance and organizational compliance and governance processes, while considering the people component or the human element in combination with that technology solution. And you've both touched on it before, but Henal, I'm wondering if you could just add a little bit more on really what you're seeing and your approach in your discussions.
Yeah, I love the thoughts. So I agree. I mean, compliance is first and foremost about people and culture. I mean, when you, for example, compare contract life cycles to a patient's care journey, you have handoff, check-in, discharge, sign-off. Everything needs a clear protocol, tight coordination. So AI by itself is never going to be a silver bullet for that organizational misalignment. In fact, two birds, one stone. Solve the people and culture first as you deploy AI. So that said, when you legislate against risk, meaning you are codifying your guardrails up front, for example, the Lily's example where, hey, by the way, just so that you know, April has 30 days, right? I think, and when you have a living compliance playbook, AI can absolutely crush it and become your real-time sentinel. And that's really where things are going. And at DocJuris, we think about step one as defining those guardrails and those inputs. I mean, one joke that I tell a lot of our prospects, friends and colleagues is, AI is like a baby shooting lasers out of its eyes. You often need to grab that baby and point it in the right direction. So your legal and compliance teams need to map out clause by clause what's acceptable under all the different rules, HIPAA, state privacy laws, BAs, et cetera. And that playbook then feeds a review engine, which should continuously scan incoming contracts, flag deviations and gaps. And that's where the promise line is, right? But for the 55% that are interested in contract review, now, of course, you still need people in the loop. And that's why it's important to bake in regular checkpoints to review what AI is flagging, adjust the thresholds, update the playbook as regulations evolve. So, my last point here, I think, is that we should push back on the idea that we can feed some magical AI a bunch of data on a continuous basis, and somehow that leads to the promised land. I think that's what Lily and I here are agreeing with. I think the problem here is that this leap can also perpetuate mistakes or decisions made under pressure and increase risk. So, and in the AI world, there's this term called AI drift, when you rely on a bunch of inputs and machine learning, and now the model is drifting because maybe we were under pressure. And so in summary, governance is key, and legislating the governance will prevent a lot of these concerns that legal and compliance teams have with AI.
Let's talk about, thank you, Henal. Let's talk about some real world examples of how organizations are successfully using AI-powered solutions and individuals to streamline their processes. And Henal, maybe we can start with you sharing a few examples.
Yeah, I can lead with some low-hanging fruit, and I'll describe it in the context of DocJuris and how we've deployed it, but there's some low-tech solutions here that you can deploy on your own as well. So number one is, what we see a lot is automating sub-threshold reviews. And so we have this one regional health system used to waive legal review on purchase orders under 10K. But underneath the surface, they're worried about hidden risks like copyleft clauses in their imaging equipment or indemnity mismatches in their data use agreements, which both present risks that go beyond the purchase price naturally, right, for the compliance folks in the room. But and so by integrating AI-powered screening, they can now auto screen those low-value contracts against those high-risk areas. So about 85% end up getting a clean bill of health and bypass manual review entirely, while the remaining 15% are kicked up for governance sign-offs. So the result is that there's, they were able to slash risk on contracts that were not being reviewed anyway. So that's I think, low-hanging fruit. Another one is standardizing terms. So going back to governance, I mean, another healthcare system was spending, I think, days manually hunting for deviations in vendor MSAs, particularly around warranty clauses and liability caps. So the real-world application here is using AI like DocJuris to flag non-standard warranty carve-outs, liability limits. So they went from this 4-day average negotiation cycle down to 24 hours. And then meanwhile, embracing and empowering other departments to look for those things on the front lines and then moderating the review. So having a process there. So at scale, this really is valuable because unfortunately, Microsoft Word is where a lot of data goes to die. So even if you have great processes on the front end, it's hard to roll that information up to a dashboard. And where is it that we are always fighting in our agreement? So not only leads to good front end review, but management can look at the bigger picture and strategize around the types of risks that are the most important. And I think the final one is just reclaiming bandwidth. So we're working with this mid-sized pharma company. Attorneys are previously logging 8-hour reviews on every MSA. So our guided checklist on both the incoming red lines to their template as well as third-party paper, they're able to knock out that first pass review in about 90 minutes. So we talked a little bit about velocity, but the real benefit here is that the extra capacity was able to allow their legal team to focus on more strategic projects versus the drudgery of staring at fine print all day. So there's a lot more that legal teams can bring to the table in terms of strategy and being a partner to the business. And I think that's a pretty big low-key benefit that AI can bring to many organizations.
Thank you, Henal. Lily, if you want to add.
Yeah, Henal, I think your last example, like we hear people say they want to work to the top of their licenses. They don't want to be stuck in the mud, right? And they want to really be thinking about the hard and untangling the hard. And then the other piece, like to really speeding up some of the contract reviews is we talked with a customer who was like, we are signing contracts for Band-Aids and laser beams. And you know what? I don't really care about those Band-Aid contracts. So those we might be able to get through with a DocJuris, but the laser beam contract, I really want to be spending more of my time on and, thinking about that 30% increase in contracts, like maybe the 30% that are on Band-Aids and gauze and that kind of stuff maybe doesn't need as much attention. Yeah. So on the post-signature side, I think really where people have coalesced is around this like AI-assisted contract abstraction. So this is the idea of when you're putting things into a repository, you really want to pull out important features that are important data points in the contract so that you can find it later, you can do things about that contract later. And so I think initially when we talk to people who are using this feature, they think that this is going to save them time. And it is, but it's not really, there's one instance in which it does save time, right? We have this lady who their organization just underwent a merger, and she has this huge folder of contracts that she needs to load into our system. And it's never been a high priority on her list. But now that she has sort of this AI assisted contract abstraction, like whenever she's got 10 minutes, she can just bam, 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 get through her to-do list a little bit faster. But really where the ROI comes in on this is reducing risk, right? Making sure that if you're not the only one putting contracts into your contract repository, that these other people like spread across the entire organization are actually putting in those data fields that might kick off another action, right? And they might not be there in a year from now, but you still are going to need to manage the life cycle of that contract going forward. So things like, are you sure that you didn't misread whether or not this vendor has access to PHI? Oh, because if you answer that incorrectly, you could be missing a BAA, and that puts you at risk for fines and penalties, as we all know. We talk to other customers who say, you know what, I wasn't thinking one day and I accidentally, fat fingered something, and the AI caught that I actually might have put in the wrong auto renewal date, right? And that is just ROI in and of itself, right? That pays for the entire tool.
Thanks, Lily. Both you and Henal shared some really fantastic examples, and I think we could spend a lot of time with talking about other real-world examples. For those organizations that are looking ahead, maybe they haven't already adopted AI into their CLM processes, or they're on the journey and they're on the path, but they'd like to continue that. What are some of the steps that you would recommend to really ensure a smooth transition? And Lily, if you don't mind, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think first is you want to identify the features and solutions that are going to help you catch that risk, right? Imagine yourself, like I'm talking to all the compliance and legal people on the call. Imagine yourself at your worst, like you've gotten norovirus, you've been up all night. What areas of your day-to-day do you want to have extra backup, right? That's really where AI is going to help you. And I'm sure as you're thinking about it, like a majority of those are pretty well-defined use cases, and they're going to be fairly specific to healthcare. Like if you have other attorneys or attorney friends, they might not also be thinking about the same things that you're thinking about. And so therefore your chance of getting a precision from AI can actually increase. I think you also want to be thinking about how user-friendly a tool is, because that will help you with the rollout and adoption. I know a lot of people here are very comfortable with AI, but I think as you try, if you want more and more people to use that AI tool, you want to make sure that's not scary and intimidating to them, because sometimes those like flash beta, and they flash things that make you unsure if what you're doing is going to be permanent and or like mess up something downstream that you're not aware of. Second, I think, is just really be skeptical and know that there is some level of interpretation here, right? You're asking a tool to weigh in on something that you might have been well trained to do. Like you have experience, you understand nuance, and anyone that's using this tool may not have had those experiences, but they're still responsible for that output. Right? That's the culture of compliance. Everyone is responsible for compliance, right? And that's picking tools that will help show work, show its thinking and its logic to the people who are using the tool. And you really want to be thinking about, is it enhancing guardrails that you already have in place and not confusing the user because it's like overly complicated or not helping there.
It's fantastic. Thank you, Lily. Henal, did you have anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think when it comes to, one of the things that we like to think about when designing this type of an implementation involving AI, at the end of the day, it often comes down to how well you're able to rally the people around the process. And, I know that's a kind of a hand-wavy thing to say, but it becomes really important to design upfront and ask the hard questions around for example, where's the volume? So one thing that is highly beneficial for us when we're thinking about implementations is, we don't have to conquer every problem up front. Let's try to chip away at this in sort of an iterative fashion. And let's not bite off more than we can chew, as they say. So, I think that would be one thing I would add to that.
Thank you, Henal. Yeah, completely aligned there. And I know we have the same approach as we've talked about before. I want to leave some time for Q&A, but I'd like to go ahead and start thinking about looking ahead. How do you see AI evolving, particularly in CLM, and what should organizations be thinking about and preparing for within the next couple of years? Lily, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think we talked a lot about contract data abstraction already and sort of the value in managing the future life cycle of a contract. Other areas that, there are a couple of use cases that have been bubbling up to the surface. So we hear a lot about contract summaries, and I think where we really see success in this is when people are using this to give an overview to an exec, like somebody who's going to use that information at an arm's length. Maybe they're part of the signature process and just want a quick, here is what this contract is about. But as everyone on this call knows, the value is really in the details and in the nuance. So you have to decide whether or not that's really beneficial to your organization. The second area that we hear a lot about actually is self-servicing on questions on specific contracts, right? So this is really a chatbot that can help you translate clauses, and not you, but business stakeholders, like helping business stakeholders answer questions about individual contracts. And I think what you got to think about here is, do you want your organization to get advice or interpretation from an AI model? Like, what are the actions they're going to take from those answers? And will those put you at risk or not? Sometimes, and you will have a good gauge of that based on, are you getting pinged with really simple questions? Do you have people in your organization that sort of fly, go off the cuff and just take actions without talking to you first? And depending on sort of the culture, I could see this very much helping people so that you're not getting hit with all of these interpretation questions. You can mainly focus on the more sophisticated questions and save a little bit of time that way, if that makes sense. Third is, we really see a lot about clause searching here. So you're not searching for a single contract. You're not choosing upfront what you might search on later. This is tariffs just went up, and now I want to go pull out all the tariff pricing from all the active contracts you have today. This is really about trying to pull a big list that you can take action on, this like body of contracts going forward, and is pretty ad hoc. This, I think, is a little bit more on the edge of like feasibility, I think. So we're definitely excited. This is a really cool problem, and I think high impact to an organization.
Thank you, Lily. Henal is the founder and CEO of DocJuris. You certainly saw the future trends several years ago when you started the company, and talk to us about what future trends you continue to see as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, if I go back to the baby shooting lasers out of its eyes, I mean, just on a very basic level, that baby's going to grow up, right? And I think just to give you a really interesting data point that everyone can sort of think about and chew on over lunch is, when ChatGPT 3 came out, or 2, even the early stages of the model, there's only so much context that you could put into the chat, and there was only so much response you'd get back. There's tokens in, tokens out. Some of the most recent models that have come out this week, like actually literally last week, you can put in over 1 million tokens of context, which is the equivalent of 20 novels. So whether it's going to do it well and accurate will be just a matter of time. I think that the freight train has already left. I mean, this is going to be the future. The models are going to get better. They're going to get more accurate. So I think just foundationally, I think that's everyone should just take that away, is that these models are just going to get better. There's no question about that. We're seeing it daily in our own research since we started the company in 2018. But if we get a little bit more specific, I think first, embedded task orchestration. So today you can ask a bot to write you an email to give a summary, or, hey, tell me what the tariff risks are in these 14 contracts. Tomorrow it'll be, cool, now what would you like me to do with that summary? Do you want me to draft a Word document? Do you want me to spin up a spreadsheet? Do you want me to assess your balance sheet and highlight certain rows where there's risk and add a comment? Update CLM fields, kick off an e-signature workflow that's moderated, all without you jumping between apps. So there's just sort of multimodal, I would call it task orchestration, that will be the next use case. And a lot of that's just software, by the way. But as the models get better, and as software companies like ours start to embrace it more, you're going to see more application. And so it's software around these models. And as these models get better, the software is also going to grow. Second is, I think, contextual awareness. So AI will be able to pull in data from EHR, billing systems, real-time analytics. So for the lawyers in the room, I still believe that today AI is not here to replace advocacy, negotiation, and context. But I think context is probably the first domino to fall in the near future. So there's already early evidence of this being the next big thing in enterprise applications. So, instead of a standalone clause markup and analysis, you can get insights like, hey, this pricing amendment you just drafted aligns with your top revenue services line, or this liability cap may expose you based on that recent merger, speaking of M&A. So things like this are going to be truly game-changing and are happening now with our customers, is just collapsing that context gap that we have because of how involved we are in different aspects of the business. I think third is just autonomous governance loops. I mean, once you're able to define your compliance playbook, AI will continually monitor live contracts, flag deviations in real time, spin up tickets, send notifications. And so there's going to be it'll be much more agentic. And so even suggesting update clauses for legal to review before they go into production is some of the things that we see, and some of the more crazy things that we think and anticipate in the next decade or two is agents negotiating against each other in a contract review without people in the room. So, I mean, these things are going to come. It's just a matter of time, and we just have to be prepared. So I think today, if you're a healthcare organization, first start by unifying clause libraries and templates, standardizing your appetite for risk, mapping out that end-to-end process. So when these smarter, task-driven, context-rich agents arrive, which we feel strongly is inevitable, you'll have the plumbing in place to execute. And people will remain an important part of this puzzle. It's just our skill set has to evolve, right? It's the practice of law has to evolve toward this. And we saw this with typewriters to WordPerfect to Microsoft Word, and now this is the next. This is definitely the next leap.
Thank you, Henal. I want to ask just a couple of questions that we have. You've both talked about the people and incorporating people into the process, and have both talked about, AI really can't be blindly trusted, and that validation is key. And both of our companies take that same methodology and approach. If you could each just touch, and maybe we'll start, Lily, with you, on what specific guardrails or review processes have you seen work best in healthcare, with healthcare legal teams and compliance teams to safely operationalize AI?
Yeah, I think it's really where you're already doing the same process. You just maybe have something pre-filled out by AI, right? So you're reacting to something instead of having to generate that response yourself. And I don't know about you, but it's always easier for me to correct something than it is for me to come up with something to begin with. And so I think that is, your hopefully your team is already bought into a tool, and it's really just trying to use that same tool, but in a sort of faster manner.
Thank you, Lily. Henal, a question for you. You talked about prompting AI effectively to get better results. You talked about, the future state of AI. How can, or do you have examples of how legal teams can structure prompts to ensure that, as they're starting to think about usage of AI, there's consistent, reliable outputs, in particularly when they're reviewing contracts?
Yeah, it's definitely an art. It reminds me of, I don't know if you all remember when Google came out, right? There were the haves and have-nots, right? The haves were those that could tap into Google, and they had that magic wand, right? And I think that's, prompt engineering is naturally much more complex than a Google search. But, I think, well, let me first start with some wrong assumptions. So some people assume, and I think this goes back to misconceptions, that, I can just feed this thing a bunch of data, and then it's going to produce a result for me. I think there is a very important component of prompt engineering that everyone that's in the room should learn. And there's a method to prompt engineering, and there's so many articles and best practices, but one thing to think about is chain of thought. So and it goes back to the April example, right? So the more of a nudge you give these AI models, the better nudge it's going to give you back. So and so when we think about that practically, when you're building your playbooks, you should think about playbooks as an amalgamation of the criteria that you're identifying in a contract. So let's say I'm looking for governing law. What are the outcomes that I'm anticipating, if it's found or not found, or Delaware versus New York versus the state in which your healthcare organization is? And then how do we respond to that? So you have to kind of think about it as an expert system. And so it's these expert systems embedded in these prompts that really, I think, makes it more consistent and reliable. The problem is when you assume that very generic, unstructured text is going to result in better results or more of it. You know, more is not always better with these models. So the more direction that you provide an AI model up front, I think ultimately you're going to get better results. We have a client that came to us with a mountain of historically signed agreements, and they said, well, can we use this to train your AI to automatically mark up third-party SaaS agreements? And we said, sure, but you know, that playbook that you have on the side that your legal team wrote is actually more effective for the model to interpret and do it well, because the prompt engineering in the playbook serves as the rules of the road, and then the historical documents are how the rubber meets the road. So it's that 1-2 punch that becomes really important. But yeah, I think prompt engineering is an important skill set, but it's also, you know, just being really specific in terms of your needs. I mean, one simple trick is, what are your goals? So you can try this today in Copilot. What's your goal? What is the output that you expect? And what are some warnings that you want to advise the AI model to think about? And then what are the don'ts? And if you just follow that framework, it gives you a good feel for how much better of a result you'll get. And so, again, it goes back to governance. It's when you feed the model a governance framework, you'll end up getting better results.
And try different models, because different models are good at different things, right? Yeah. You can try the same prompt with different, and so that's why AI I think is so overwhelming. And it seems like we have a lot of experts in the room, so I'm sure they all have realized that too.
Fantastic. So for those in our audience who are familiar with AI, hopefully they picked up a couple of tips around prompting, and then those that are not as familiar or not as comfortable with it certainly have something to try out this afternoon. I know, you know, I'll be testing some different models. As we wrap up, just would love to get some final thoughts, Henal, both from you and from Lily. Really appreciate your time today. Henal, any final thoughts for our audience?
Yeah, I love the discussion. I mean, before we sign off, I mean, I think maybe treat AI as your co-pilot, not a replacement. Amplify your strengths of your process, but it needs control. So I think the second thing is anchor every AI initiative with a playbook and put some work up front into legislatively defining that risk profile and having a process around updating it, because that's something that that's going to continuously be important, and it's what's necessary to achieve the outcomes that you're looking at. I would say third, you know, measure, iterate, refine. So set clear KPIs around cycle times, and, you know, begin with the end in mind. Like, what do I want to achieve first? And then what's the pain point that I want to solve? And what's the user adoption risk? And then loop that back into what you want to solve with AI. I think Lily mentioned it earlier, you don't want to just focus on the solution. Let's focus on the problem first that we're seeking to conquer. And I'd say finally, partner with vendors who speak healthcare fluently. I mean, AI is ultimately going to make everything more specialized, including AI companies themselves. And this is actually why Ntracts has been our most successful partner to date in terms of real results for our customers in healthcare. So everything's going to become more verticalized. Lawyers are going to get more specialized, and that also applies to AI and the models that support it.
Well said. Thank you, Henal. And of course, we really love the partnership, and our clients and the market, I think, is finding a lot of value in Ntracts and DocJuris working together. Lily, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think very much in the same vein, right? AI is just a form of automation. There's a lot of ways that we automate processes, and that some of them include AI and some of them don't, because AI has pros and cons. And so again, sort of what Henal said, you really want to direct your organization to think about the problem that you're solving and just not pointing to AI as a solution. I'm just thinking about the baby with the laser eyes right now, right? And causing chaos. But assuming, yeah, assuming you do find something that you love and in an area where AI is really the best solution for your problem, you're only going to get the best out of that AI, and you're going to and get sort of the biggest outcome that you could dream of is when you give it that specific instruction, right? The playbook that Henal was talking about, the context windows he's talking about, and the software wrapper to make it so that the users who are interacting with the AI know what's going on and can trust it, and if not trust it, at least be critical of it and understand how it's coming and arriving to its answer. You don't want to spend money on an AI tool where you're just correcting it all the time because it's telling you there are 31 days in April. You want something that's going to be helping you stay efficient and be right more than it's wrong.
Thank you, Lily. And I know this is particularly the world that you're living in right now as we continue to, incorporate and embed AI into the Ntracts solution. I would just like to thank you both so much for this conversation. It was incredible. I'm so fortunate to have had an opportunity to moderate it, and I know the audience really appreciated the discussion. As we wrap, would also like to thank the audience for joining us today. If you'd like to learn more about Ntracts and DocJuris, please feel free to reach out to Ntracts at www.ntracts.com or at info@ntracts.com. And thank you all again for joining us today.
Thanks.
Excellent. And that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank Stephanie, Henal, and Lily for an excellent panel, and Ntracts for sponsoring today's webinar. To learn more about the content presented today, please check out the resources section on your webinar console and fill out the post-webinar survey. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you have a wonderful afternoon.